Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Crazy Libertarian. It is another cold and bitter time of the year. If you're on your Wednesday morning commute, I am sorry. If you're listening inside on a Tuesday night, I am sorry as well. You'll probably have to be outside at some point, and that is just not fun. I wish there was a way I could blame government for this, but I'm going to leave them out of it. Other than the fact that maybe they could plow the roads once in a while, right? But you are listening to the Crazy Libertarian. You are on 88.1 FM. Thanks for tuning in. That call-in number is 701-566-0917. Again, 701-566-0917. You know, as much as I have to bring it in with an obligatory mention of the roads, I really wanted to talk today about some of the weird and kind of horrifying implications of how we've let the federal government come into our life. And I brought this up earlier, but I really kind of want to emphasize, because I was watching, believe it or not, I know, blame me, I would have been better off just chugging a handle and going to bed for the night. But I decided to kill some brain cells in a novel manner, and I watched the Democratic National Convention presidential debates between whatever various talking heads they had. And I've been listening to the criticisms between the candidates and those who oppose Trump, and obviously everything other than that Trump is a horrible person, which he is. He cheats on his wife and then pays it off. I mean, what a god-awful person, right? So, but really, what the Democrats are differentiating themselves on, other than the social policy here or there, is largely how much free crap they're going to give out, right? And a lot of this, hey, we're going to come up with these different government agencies or these programs, we're going to forgive your student loans, we're going to do this, we're going to set up a system, blah, 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 whatever it may be. Even to a certain extent, Andrew Yang's $1,000 a month UBI, however you want to say it, it all kind of relies on this bureaucracy, right? And so I wanted to take a couple of very specific, and I think applicable today into our area, first-hand personal accounts, and kind of talk about how this just doesn't make sense. We really need to get over this nonsense that we can actually... I will not rest America and Fargo Moorhead until we get to the day when the question becomes not what was your policy purport to do, but how will you ensure follow through, compliance, and get your bureaucracy to act in accordance in an efficient way, because that's not even on the discussion, and that literally kills. Literally kills. And let's start off with the FDA. We're going to talk about them later today, about the FDA getting their greasy little hands in the vaping at the, because Philip Morris and all those awesome people need to continue making money well into the 2020s and beyond, even though people are switching to safer alternatives and all that stuff, and how they're completely boggling that situation. I want to go back further. Let's go back to 1950s, the real cool, nostalgic, the time. I think that's what Trump was referring to when he said that America was great. I'm pretty sure that Trump is still just referring to a series of Norman Rockwell paintings when he says that he's going to make America great again. But let's assume the 1950s. What really started then was a very concentrated effort, specifically by the sugar lobby, by the corn lobby, by all types of farmers, because what the science was actually saying at the time was, sugar actually isn't that great for you. But of course they went in, they influenced the FDA, money switched hands, and then through a bunch of horrible junk science, like amazingly bad, horrible conclusions, horrible bias involved, like I said, totally unethical, the federal government, on behalf of just a few producers, came out and said that fat was the enemy, and furthermore that sugar was healthy. I mean, as I'll mention later, there were advertisements at the time that mentioned sugar being for health and wellness and fitness because it has quick carbs and all of this awesome stuff. And it influenced American health policy for decades. I assume most of us remember the food pyramid, right? We all know that, right? Grains at the bottom, meats and all the other actual healthy stuff towards the top. Why is it that the number one source of calories that they recommended was quick and easy, cheap, refined grains? I'll let you rest on that, but if you know much about nutrition, that probably shouldn't have ever been the base of most of what we recommend to people. Now, what have the results of this been? Now, obviously, the American obesity epidemic has a lot. There's a lot to say about it. Lifestyle choices are involved, what we choose to eat and drink, all that stuff. But it cannot be denied that a large part of the obesity epidemic stems directly from Americans believing that eating fat will make them fat. And the reasons that Americans have continued to believe that eating fat will make you fat is exactly because of these government regulations that came up 50 or 60 years ago when the farm producers, when the corn producers and when the sugar industry really didn't want to lose their bacon. That's what it came down to. What has it led to? We have the second most obese country in America. We have the second most obese country on earth. Not in America. We are the most obese country in America, believe it or not. Very definitive one-of-one ranking. But we have all kinds of problems. Diabetes is rampant. Everyone knows someone who's had a very serious health effect from obesity or diabetes or something related to it, right? This is a generational epidemic. We have kids nowadays that, we have people that are 12 and 13 that are weighing as much as adults used to weigh back in the day, and we're having huge proportions, things never seen. All indirectly because of this FDA effort. All in an effort to make you healthier and safer. And I feel like they don't get enough criticism for that. They don't get enough flack for that. We're willing to tax sodas and other juices to 20 to 50%, but we're not willing to ask where that source of information came from and what it means for public policy and other stuff like that in the future. That seems very odd. As a matter of fact, I would go on to say that seems very, very wrong. So I just really want to, and keep this in mind for what we're talking about later. The FDA's been blatantly wrong before, and this doesn't, and this assumes that some bureaucracy isn't being totally hijacked by the CIA like they did during MK Ultra, and they're not giving out vaccines that turn out to be some horrible disease agent or some other experiment, which is also something that's happened with stunning and scary regularity throughout time over the course of the history of this quote-unquote great country. But I want to circle back to let's just start being a little more critical. And there's another group that doesn't get nearly enough criticism, and it's actually kind of tied. If you want to bring in the rampant obesity and diabetes crises on Native American reservations, what's very interesting is that most of people agree that the Native Americans have gotten a horribly raw deal. The government has never been honest to them. They've faced an incredible amount of discrimination. It's been tough. But what's interesting is that the stance of the United States federal government has been to continue to monitor their affairs for them. Think about that. There is no Bureau of White Affairs. There is no Bureau of Black Affairs. There is no Bureau of Asian Affairs. But there is a Bureau of Indian Affairs. And that's a very, very dangerous and very, very belittling thing. First off, what you need to realize about this is that all of this comes back from a Supreme Court case in the 1820s that said that the United States federal government's relationship to the tribes was as a parent to his ward, meaning effectively that the federal government has, in its own great benevolence, decided that they are going to come out and save the Native Americans from themselves and remove them from blah, 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 and they'll totally be great stewards of their money and resources. This obviously has not panned out. Would be the biggest understatement on my show, and I've said a lot of understatements. I'd like to, and we can talk about the boarding schools, the horrible things that went on there. By the way, I would like to say that the one thing that Canada definitely did worse than the United States on par, they were both horrible, definitely worse at the boarding schools, Canada. Still kind of quiet about that. Come on, Trudeau, you've apologized to everyone. Let's see a couple more, Join the powwow, Trudeau. Come on. Your international reputation is declining. But nonetheless, so we've had boarding schools where people's cultures were stripped away, sexual assault was rampant, people were beat, people were horrible things. If they talked in their native language, they would get smacked. Just terrible, horrifying things. We have massacres of Native Americans in their hunting lands as the white people expanded out westward. We had massive killings of the bison and their natural game. We had their ways of life torn up. I mean, my God, it was so horrific that Iron Maiden wrote a best-selling song about it. That is not... If Iron Maiden writes a song about your situation, that was not a great situation. That was a horrible situation. And yet they did. And like throughout time, right? And then not only that, but the federal government has like consistently just lied about the treaties. They obviously haven't fulfilled them. And then even when they do fulfill them, it comes with a bunch of regulations. But despite all that, which is somehow well known, and yet we still somehow have a Bureau of Indian Affairs. That raises a lot of very angering and hatred intensifying questions. But let's put all of that behind us, right? It's important for context. Let's put all of that behind us. There is one critical way, one small little critical way, that the federal government is continuing to lock Native Americans in an intergenerational cycle of poverty. And by the way, the federal government has no problem spending money on Native American reservations when it comes to arresting people and tearing apart families, even in the 21st century. If you don't believe so, I recommend that you take a little trip to Cass Lake, the Leech Lake Reservation. The federal and state governments are very invested in Native Americans when it means that they can throw them away and make money on them. That is exactly what they're invested in. But one of the things that they've done is that because of how it works and the government to governments of it and the convolutedness of the treaties and the fact that they are still largely seen as wards of the state, Native Americans don't have the same rights to their land, as stunning and hypocritical and evil as it is you or me do. And what that results in, because it's not their land, they're not able to do things that you need to do in order to develop. Why is the reason that many reservations have continued to stagnate while towns just outside of reservations have gotten way better? Yeah, there's a story about corruption on the reservation. Yeah, there's a story about racism and bigotry. But because the Native Americans don't own their personal land, they don't own the land in the way that, you might own an acre that you buy in Fargo, they can't put it up for collateral. Now let's think about this. Because they're not talented or smart or whatever horrible justification the federal government came up with a couple hundred years ago, in order to manage their own affairs, they don't have access to that capital. You want to know why there's no jobs on the reservation? It's not because people are lazy or whatever bigoted excuses. It's not because of some genetic thing. It's nothing like... It is solely, largely, a tale about capital and how much of it is locked up. Do you know why there are tons of Native American tribes with vast mineral resources underneath them that are poor as hell? It has nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with environmentalism or anything like that. It's the fact that they can't actually get investment into that capital because it's not their land in the first place. It's owned and managed by the federal government on their behalf, which is obviously doing a horrible job about it. So what do we have here? We have a federal government that since day one has viewed this, an entire nation of people is a subhuman group. They viewed them as kids. They viewed them as idiots. Horrible, horrifying things. They've subjected them for literally centuries. They've stolen their land. They've lied about their treaties. And then at the end of the day, they have the audacity to continue taking taxpayer-funded money in order to say that they're going to go out and help solve the crises on Native American land, not even giving them the opportunity to enter into business. Think about that. Think about how crippling that would be if in the city of Fargo, all of this cool stuff that we have behind me, we couldn't leverage any of that land for capital loans. That's ridiculous. That is just not how the game works. And yet that's the rules that the Native Americans on the reservations are forced to live by. So then are we surprised when there's that lack of mobility and that amount of government repression that there are going to be a lack of jobs, lack of opportunity, and a high rate of drug abuse and alcohol abuse? And then the federal government, to top it all off, the situations that they created, has the audacity, like Donald Trump did in announcing celebrating Native American Heritage Month in November, whether he's announcing it, celebrating it, what have you. He explicitly stated that the federal government was going to give more money to work on countering drug to work on countering drugs in the region and to prosecute drug transport, people that sell drugs in the area, which is interesting until you remember that a lot of the reasons that people are doing that is because of the huge underlying themes of hopelessness, poverty, and addiction deeply ingrained in the society. If you want to help the Native Americans, don't go throw any more of them in jail. If you want to help reservations, as a matter of fact, if you want to help them, stop attempting to hold their hands. Stop doing what the federal government does best and acting totally just evilly towards them, whilst also claiming to do it for their own good. Because that's effectively the situation that we're at, right? We've had centuries of this, and yet the discussion hasn't changed. And so I'd really like to go back. What do both of these stories have in common? In both instances, it's a federal program set up explicitly to help a certain subset of people or a certain issue in the country, and then it does the exact opposite. So maybe, just maybe, the next time you're listening to a presidential debate and you hear, I don't know, a man with very, very small sausage-like fingers bring up how Mexico is going to pay for the wall, or the next time that you hear someone who looks like she could be 1/10,000th Native American talk about how we're going to have free college for all, maybe, just maybe, ask who's going to do it and examine their track record. Because, folks, not only does this doesn't make sense, the Bureau of Indians, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, almost committed a genocide. Like, a government that's willing to do that to a people that it is constitutionally supposed to protect and support is not a government that's going to be looking out for your best interest. And until we have some very serious efforts to have reforms about our bureaucracy, to change oversight, to make it more responsive to reform, to make it actually, I don't know, at the very least, it would be nice if we could do what the people said that they were going to do, right? At the very least, that might be a start. Then all of the other discussions are really kind of null and void, because you're going to have to throw on an extra 20 to 30% of spending in order to get around such an inefficient bureaucracy, or the plan's not going to work. And that's a very critical hole that's missing on that debate stage. You know, maybe in 2016, if Gary Johnson would have made the debates, we could have had this great national moment about whether bureaucracy as we know it is really good for America, but we never got that opportunity. And so I'd just kind of like to close out today, before we get ready for our interview, to talk about how the FDA is also screwing up the decrease in smoking rates throughout the nation. I'd just like to say, once again, let's think a little more critically, and going beyond that, let's check their receipts, folks, because I've done the math, I've done the homework, I've checked their receipts. I don't want these people paying off my student loans, because in 20 years the program will be canceled, and I'll probably have to pay $150,000 in back taxes on it. That's just how the government does it. So I'll just end with this one simple little request. If the experience of the Native Americans in this country has taught us anything, it's that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't ask the federal government to solve any of our problems for us. It can go to some pretty bad places. I'll be back in a few minutes with my special guest. This is Bradley Foster on the Crazy Libertarian. You are on 88.1. Don't touch that dial. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Crazy Libertarian. You know, we're talking a lot about regulations and just a bunch of people really attempting, we hope, to do good and trying to help the world, and in the end they end up doing so much. Well, they end up doing a lot of things, but it's rarely that. And in order to discuss this phenomena of people not minding their own business and making life worse on literally everyone except who they say everyone, including the group that they're trying to help, we have Connor Schmidt, a manager from Mellow Moods.
Hey, thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah, so, you know, we've been talking a lot about the FDA earlier in the episode, and one of the things that I want to bring up with you is your experience and stuff. Why don't you kind of give some insight? How long have you been working at Mellow Moods, or?
I've been kind of working with the corporate Mellow for like about 5 years, kind of like with different owners and stuff. So I mean, technically, if you want to get like down to brass tacks about it, I guess it'd be like 6 months with the new Mellow Mood that we just opened up in Fargo here.
That address again is
1414 12th Avenue North. We're right next to Herd and Horns. Come and check us out.
Obligatory plug. Now that we got that out of the way, hopefully there are no government monitors watching that one. So you've kind of been around for the entirety, not the entirety, but like when vaping went mainstream, right? That kind of seems like over the last 5 years, it's really gone from...
It's completely evolved now, and it's something totally different than what I remember seeing it when it first came out. I remember there used to be like a new device like every month, and then it would break, and then you'd have to go in and get the brand new one that has 2 new gizmos on it, and what happened to the one I just bought? It's no longer supported.
Really?
But it's definitely something completely different now with the huge RDA community, or juuling is now the super duper big thing, and all the kids getting into that. So it's definitely taken a big jump in a totally different way. It's so much more mainstream now.
When you talk about it going mainstream, what do you, as best you can kind of what you've either seen nationally or what you've seen in your own experience, are most people that get into it kind of new to it, or do you see a lot of people that were using nicotine products in the first place?
I'm definitely seeing it's a lot of younger kids. So that's like lately I've been seeing it's more, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that were definitely getting into it more. We used to see a bunch of older folks, from kind of all walks of life, all different ages, kind of going over from, using kind of a more combustible tobacco, so just like cigarettes or, cigars and stuff, to using vape just to get rid of that carbon monoxide, whole effect, keep your teeth a little bit whiter, or, there was a whole bunch of benefits, I guess, from switching over from like a combustible smoke to that of vaping. So if you need your nicotine fix, you can still get that, but yeah, like you can kind of just avoid the whole smoking altogether.
All that so it sounds like because obviously that's always been the big concern about with anti-smoking campaigns, has always been, how do we reach young smokers? Well, it might turn out that we might not have young smokers per se. And that sometimes feels like a cop-out, but it sure seems to me like, and I came from an area, northern Minnesota, where the anti-smoking thing really didn't, take effect until vaping took over effectively. So, for better or for worse, it definitely seemed like something that was at least an alternative. And at that, it seems to be, based on what we know now, a much less harmful alternative at that.
Oh, of course. It's, you're getting rid of, carbon monoxide emissions, which, they've totally linked to, birth defects when it comes to pregnancies, cancer in itself, versus just getting the straight nicotine dosage that you can get now, and being able to wean yourself up or wean yourself down. So you could quit smoking altogether. You have that option now when it comes to using vape products. So, and that's kind of what it appeals to, too, is like those all different walks of life, these different flavors and such. So you can get the guy that wants to smoke the classic tobacco that's been doing it for 60 years, or, you could, find that kid that's, 20 years old that made a mistake in picking it up and now he can't put it down, so I need my raspberry gummy bear flavor or whatnot. So
it definitely provides it's a unique marketplace, that's for sure.
You betcha. You betcha.
So, you betcha, North Dakota. That's how you know he didn't. This isn't all corporate, folks. But what I really want to kind of emphasize about all of this is that it's really complex, right? It's a really...
right now, it's kind of like... It's very, very different just because everybody's doing something else right now. Like, I know there's... like, I just looked... Texas just recently... did a grandfather clause for people that were 18 to 20, so you'd be able to smoke, after, 2001 if you were born on a certain date. I know Virginia allows their military, people in the military to smoke on bases right now that are under 21. So it's definitely... really, really strange. I know there's even some local people around here that are just waiting for the state to actually start enforcing, the laws before they start, abiding by that federal regulation now.
Yeah, because of course it is federal law, so I kind of want to, now that we've discussed sort of, for those that might not know what vaping is, for lack of a better term, and some of the nuances, let's kind of get into this some of this regulation, right? Because vaping is like, I feel like it's done a really weird PR 180, because when it first came out, it was like, the end-all be-all, it felt like, in some circles, to like, do you remember when it used to be just the like blues and stuff?
Yes,
just
it's definitely been coming out a lot different since those came out. I remember seeing those at Walmart and other outlets, but you can I think Juuling's kind of taken the kind of the headpiece now when it comes to vaping. I think that might be in part with like its marketing, the fact that it had those flavors for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. I know they've canceled out and stopped manufacturing some of those flavors now. Like I know what was the most recent one, Juul Mint. They don't manufacture Juul Mint anymore. You can buy Juul Mint at our location, by the way. But essentially, it's the big head honcho because I think it was discreet. It looked like a USB drive. Mm-hmm. So you had these 18-year-old kids buying them and being like, oh, mom and dad don't ever have to learn that that I started smoking, so yep. I can just leave it right out on my desk or whatnot, or leave it in my bed, and it cost me $15-$20. Cool. Mm-hmm. And then, your little brother knows what it is, so he's gonna, steal it.
And then it starts. And so that's really been the Juuls in particular have been, for better or for worse, kind of like public enemy number one, right? As far as the whole anti-vaping thing goes.
Well, and that's a big thing right now, is the fact that Juul has been trying to be PR friendly, I'd say, by pulling some of its really popular flavors. They weren't mandated to pull those flavors. They pulled them voluntarily, and then, as an act of good faith, I'd say.
And then yet all those vaping regulations are still coming up.
Well, it's just so weird now.
So it's really convoluted. Why don't you... All right, let's take it from square one and kind of talk about some of the, what did it actually look like in practice for you? Because obviously at a location like that with a lot of vape products, you want to keep up on the regulatory stuff. Like, what was it, first off, what does the law actually state? Let's start there. Is it just like alcohol where it's 21, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, or is it like for different products, or what?
Well, according to the FDA, they started enforcing regulation for the 21 and up. So they did that immediately. And that was about, I think, on the 20th of December in 2019. So it kind of just, as soon as the president signed it, they decided to enforce it. There's also been some legislators that are like, okay, we gotta we might want to do a 90-day time limit. But what about a grandfather clause? What about, all these other things, so we can still give nicotine to those people that are now addicted instead of just cutting them cold turkey. But, that's more stuff that's being talked about. And I guess right now it's just really, really confusing for even just people like me working in like tobacco retail. So it's
very vague and overbroad and a lot of backtracking.
They've simply stated no tobacco or nicotine products sold to anyone under the age of 21. And that was the gist of it.
Okay. So we have a executive authority making one proclamation for, and keep in mind the interesting thing, and I don't know what, whatever, but it's a federal law, which is what makes it
Very
interesting. And I, of course, do not intend to speak for Malamoods, but what I have seen and what I have read is that there are actually, all across the country, there are stores where there are people, entire counties are pretty much going, yeah, well, send in the FBI. Send your SWAT team, FDA, the local sheriff's
agents could be in, Fargo. Think about that. And not
it's a numbers game. You can't really, especially for something that's like, it just feels like they've done it in such a obtuse and such an obscure and such a, because we don't even really know what we're talking about other than they apparently have the authority to regulate that only people 21 years of age above and below can get it. But the mechanisms of enforcement, all of that, have they discussed any penalties or anything? Let's say theoretically someone, a federal agent for whatever reason comes in and says, hey, I'd like that, and I'm 20 years old, and someone sells it to them, they get caught in some type of a weird, the federal government's wasted money on even dumber things before us. There's this, the SWAT team comes in, they're kicking the doors, they're searching for jewels, they have jewel sniffing dogs going around the cases, all that stuff. What do you think the actual penalties would be? Have they even discussed that? Have they even been like, hey, civil litigation or fines? Or are they just kind of like, hey, don't do it?
Well, I know, state law, they upped it in Minnesota now, where you used to be able to, it would be a $500 penalty, where if you sold a tobacco product to someone that was under 18, they'd issue that penalty. And that would be not only to the store, but that's also a personal penalty.
Similar for selling alcohol.
Yep. So, but recently they've actually just bumped up the penalty for not even necessarily tobacco products. You can still get cigarettes and do that $500 fine. But however, if you sell a vape right now, so if I were to sell a Juul to an 18-year-old kid or under 18 years old at the time, the penalty now is $1,000. So they're definitely trying to make bigger strides in order to combat the whole underage sale or, eliminate vaping altogether, which is, it's weird. I know I keep saying that, but it's been a complete topsy-turvy time right now when it comes to this whole realm.
So we're seeing a ton of uncertainty there too.
Oh, big time.
So we have federal and state agencies both. And the thing that confuses me is that, as I'm sure you're painfully aware, and there's been a growing push against vaping for a while. I personally think it's driven a little more by the likes of, farmers in Kentucky and Tennessee that would like to continue to sell high quality tobacco to the fine American people than any concern about our health or well-being, because, if they cared about our health or well-being, they wouldn't have told us that sugar converts to quick energy for lots of fun action. And I'm just quoting a health advertisement from the 1950s. Why? I do not get why we trust them. But going beyond that, it really seems like it came about because of this whole there were all these like mystery illnesses that popped up from vaping, right? It seems like, gosh, about 6 months ago now, all of a sudden it was like vaping was cool, and then all of a sudden people started dying, and it was
the vitamin E, yeah,
yep, the vitamin,
the THC cartridges,
the black market THC cartridges. I would like to reiterate.
Yeah, that was a whole another cry wolf kind of thing. I think that more so had to do with the THC vape cartridges, not at all with regular tobacco e-liquid.
No, they actually, I don't know if this is the FDA or whoever, but they just came out and said that they've pretty much, like, it was all black market vitamin E acetate cartridges.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I don't doubt that.
There was not one single jewel or whatever. And the thing that's really, like, bizarre to me is that as far as I understand it, there was, because I've actually done some research, there was a product called Honeycut that was sold out of Los Angeles that was meant to be apparently it went into some sort of mixture, and it produced these cartridges that started blowing up everywhere, right?
Right.
It was very concealable and all that stuff, and there are legal distillate cartridges that are like medicinal and safe and actually made with like regulated ingredients and stuff. But the producer of Honeycut more or less just started adding vitamin E acetate, and we're not really sure why.
Got to get your vitamin E.
Yeah.
Hey, when you want to make a cheap buck, there's those, really disgusting people, that'll, do anything, in order to make that quick buck. So
especially when you have a weird, like, something like that where it's, because I don't imagine that we'd have ever even had this problem if people all across the country could have just gone to, like, a store, like a liquor store, and gotten a cartridge that was safe and regulated and stuff. Because a lot of this, it seems interesting that we're increasing regulation on a product that was wholly unrelated to the original cause, when the original cause was itself of a weird mix of, like, marijuana is legal in California, but it's illegal federally, but at the same time we have, things that are the laws on what constitutes marijuana or paraphernalia or anything like that, you know what I mean? It's all this weird gray area. And then, of course, the really annoying thing about it is because it's illegal federally, you can't really have, you don't have that consistency state to state or location to location. And if I remember correctly, there was also an issue. It wasn't just the actual cartridges. It was like there was almost like branding going on, if I'm not mistaken, of like, but it wasn't, but the people that were producing these, like, what they were sold in weren't actually selling anything with them. They were just selling boxes, is kind of how I understand it.
You could totally get that on eBay. That was a big thing. I remember seeing that. Just if you looked up the actual brand name, you'd see people online selling just boxes, and it was just the actual packaging that these THC cartridges came in.
Which were, of course, made in some guy's bathtub or in his garage.
So all this guy needed to do was buy some empty cartridges, which you can get for pretty cheap. Fill those up with whatever he wanted to fill up, put them in a legitimate-looking box, and give them out to friends, or give them out to dealers or places that you'd want to be able to buy them. Mm-hmm. And if you're getting it from a guy and it looks legit, you're not going to ask any questions.
Mm-hmm. Especially when it has that, like, the flavor, and you're like, oh, look, it has, if I remember correctly, some of them would even, like, get really bold and put THC, like, as if it had been tested, and, like, the concentrations.
There's definitely some, like, weird stuff in there.
Which is, and it's all, so, and this is, like, horrifying, right? And, like, people died from this. It was really, really scary. I know people in the community that got sick. It definitely stretched up into the Fargo-Moorhead, greater Minnesota area. And really, it's all just because, like, a bunch of people haven't accepted the fact that maybe they should just try minding their own business. You know what I mean?
I completely agree.
This brings up I find it so interesting that the government's first reaction to an obvious failure of prohibition, this was 100% on the federal government and the state governments for making it illegal. The fact that, like, cannot emphasize this enough. There's no other way to cut it. There's no other way to honey cut it. Haha. Horrible plug. But this all came from this weird, horrible approach that they're taking to a relatively safe, relatively popular, relatively easy to obtain drug. And then their first step isn't to like even consider what they could have done differently. Their first step is to start instituting another set of prohibitionist policies, and then taking some really. And the other interesting thing about it too is like when they did when they changed alcohol from 21 or from 18 to 21, they didn't like do that unilaterally. Of course, they withheld funds. Oh, so yeah. It was like, if you don't, and it was an act of Congress, they said, we're not going to give you this money, power of the purse, whatever. But the FDA just kind of said that.
They kind of just came out and
like that. I mean,
it was there was state levels doing, legislation on it. There were, I know Montana has done some flavor bans. Oregon has done flavor bans. There's definitely some states. I think Minnesota even is like working on some legislation for some different stuff. But it's definitely changing really quick. I don't know why the federal government wanted to get involved. I also understand that there was a quote unquote epidemic. To the effect, when you have 25% of the high school population in America has tried, just juuling, which is a really high amount of nicotine, like 5% when you're starting out. Oh my God! Like I can't imagine. Like when I remember, sitting in the back seat of the car and trying to hide myself smoking the cigarettes or I don't want to get caught. It's a lot different now because you have a little drive. Nobody's gonna say anything about it. Especially if
you're a student or if it's in your backpack or whatever. Like,
well, I just feel bad for parents too.
That is tough.
No, I was gonna say like it's got to be weird. I know. What was it? People are saying, go to the bathroom, or high school kids go to the bathroom, and it's just a jewel party in there. So, smoking in the boys' room. We're on the next level. We're juuling. Juuling in the boys' room. But as far as legislation goes, I don't know why the FDA felt like they needed to step in, and do all that. I understand that there's a
crisis, but it might not necessarily be their crisis.
Right. And if it is, just a couple of parties made partially responsible, all it takes is, changing the way the device looks. I know they've even recently just got them out of gas stations. Now you have to go to specialized vape shops in order to buy, some flavors, some, different units. So it's they are taking steps. I was for that. That's probably a good idea. When you're working at a gas station, you have to deal with, just a huge line of folks. Like it can just slip up sometime. Like I get that. But when you're in an actual dedicated smoke shop where, okay, I know why you're here.
Yeah.
You're here to get something, smokable, or you're here to get something for smoking. We need to ID you.
Yeah.
And that's essentially how it goes down. But it's...
But a blanket...
Up to the states, man. Just leave it up to the states.
Exactly. And the other thing that I think is really left out of the conversation a lot, too, is, like, it's twofold. First off, if you do a flavor ban, especially, like, an across-the-board flavor ban, you're getting a black market.
Oh, yeah.
I guarantee you, because, I'm not saying that vaping overall was great or horrible. I actually tend to think that it was on the better for us, even with everything that happened. Because on par, I'd probably have more people vaping than a similar amount of people, or even a lesser amount of people smoking cigarettes. Because we know how horrible it is developmentally. We know how horrible it is, not just the nicotine. That's a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm not saying that I want anyone under the age of 18 having access to it, but if that's the gambit for less people dying of cancer, and furthermore, I'm an asthmatic. I don't like when people smoke cigarettes. It doesn't bother me when people vape. I can mind my business easier. I love it. I'm all for it.
Look what the UK's doing. I mean...
What is the UK doing?
I was going to say, they have that government-issued program, or they had a government-issued program. I'm not sure if they're still doing it. I'm sure they are, but... essentially, if you smoke cigarettes and you want to stop smoking cigarettes, the government can actually issue a e-cigarette in order to deter you from smoking regular cigarettes. If you're a pregnant woman, and you're smoking cigarettes, but you still need your nicotine fix, they actually give pregnant women, and I've seen like some articles that they give them an e-cigarette. You're killing the carbon monoxide, which is what hinders the development, in the first place for.
That's the baddie.
I was going to say big time. It hinders the development for the fetus. You're still getting your nicotine fix, and cool, Junior can develop, normally, and you're good.
The negative externalities that exist with cigarettes, at least from what we've seen so far, tend not to be there for vaping.
Right. And like what I don't understand, what like the states don't do or America doesn't do is like, why don't we issue limits on nicotine levels? Because we really don't. And that's what's like the scary part. We have these Juuls have 55 milligrams of nicotine in some of these products. 35, like I think the limit over, and don't quote me on it, but like I think the limit over in the UK is like 12 milligrams.
So we're talking
We're
way
almost
low.
5 times higher.
US. And and I wonder how much of that, to the certain extent too, is like, to play devil's advocate. The one thing that I always liked as a consumer and someone for whom nicotine has never really agreed with me long term, let's just say that. But when you buy a cigarette, you don't really know the nicotine content. You know what I mean? At the very least, when you buy it might come in like a stupidly high dose, but you know that. I wonder and the thing that really like kind of confuses me is that we have all these talks about going up against the Juuls and prohibiting that, but we really haven't moved on the discussion other than raising taxes to an ungodly level because they always need more money.
Oh, Minnesota.
Yeah. To the smokers listening on the Minnesota side of the river, as a Viking fan, I just want to say, light up. Thanks for funding that Viking stadium. We need you. We need you. Go Vikes. We'll lose in the second. Maybe next year we'll lose in the NFC title game.
Oh,
Big
man.
things. But it really seems interesting that like smoking's almost like kind of fallen off out of the conversation. You know what I mean?
There's still a bunch of kids that, smoking cigarettes doesn't appeal at all to them. And that's because smell, taste, flavor. When it comes to vaping, cool, I get to pick the flavor. If I want to smoke strawberry shortcake, I can smoke strawberry shortcake. And that's fine. And I can still get the same buzz as I could with the cigarettes. But you can't, and I know they've tried doing that. I know with like some of the tobacco leaf, I remember like when Swishers does Swishers still have, I haven't smoked a Swisher in a minute, but 15 different flavors or something.
I think they still do. They have like watermelon and stuff and grape.
Well, and the
tobacco of the country.
I was gonna say, like, it's just, it doesn't appeal to the younger generation like vaping does, and that's just because it's on demand, it's ready to go. I can do it discreetly where I want to do it.
Yep.
So if I'm going to the bathroom, cool, one puff, done.
Yep.
I'm out. If I'm like, I know some of these kids like are sitting in their high school classes and they're watching the their teacher give a lecture, and there's people that smoke through their clothing, so like it's that availability, is the big thing.
And it's such an interesting issue because it's like vaping kind of came up in this area of really no regulation at first. At first it was just kind of like, oh hey, this is a thing. And it's not smoking, and everyone is like, cool, and now it's like morphed and developed. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but...
Well, I know right now they're discussing you need to have FDA approval in order to make certain flavors of e-liquid.
Oh,
so
Lord,
that'll
drive it underground.
You might be paying $200,000 to $400,000 for FDA testing when it comes to e-liquid. So if you want your strawberry shortcake flavor per se, they might not be making it here. It sounds like it's coming up around May Like it's being discussed right now. I was hoping, because we knocked the age up to 21, that we'd have, still be able to get those like e-liquid flavors. Because I know that's like what's helped me stop smoking. I always go for
there's
fruity menthol stuff. I used to smoke like cigarettes. I used to smoke hookah like 5-6 hours a day, before work, after work, and it would just be like keep it going. But I think what helped me stop smoking and was vaping, and it was vaping those certain flavors.
And as much as we want to have a discussion on making sure that kids don't get them, as a damn adult, don't I have the right to ingest some water with nicotine that tastes like, I don't know, if I want to ingest it and have it taste like Red Bull, don't I have the damn right to ingest it and have it taste like Red Bull?
I eat Reese's Cups America.
I pay my taxes for the most part. Come on.
But, yeah, that's
just kidding, IRS.
But
don't audit me.
But yeah, I think that's something that the state should bring up. I understand if there's some states, where they feel like, cool, like all the kids in Montana, they're definitely smoking it for just the flavor, or if it, per se, I'm smoking it over here, like keep it local. Do some localization when it comes to those laws. I don't need the big man in the White House telling me, cool, everybody's the same.
Yep.
Just all follow this rule.
Exactly, and that's the other big thing too, is that there's a lot of nuance because, it might be different for for example, a place like Minnesota with historically relatively low levels of smoking might have a completely different view on vaping than I don't know, Kentucky or Missouri, which has traditionally had ridiculously high levels of, I think it's 40% at one point of people in Missouri were active cigarette smokers.
Yep.
It's insane. So the big thing is that it's not always a discussion on we need to stop kids from vaping and that's the big important goal, because there's much more to the conversation, because because really what it comes down to is, and I don't even think that most of these rules will work. I could maybe see, I think other than more identification and more parental awareness, I think that everything else is more or less gonna, until we can stop kids from getting cheap alcohol, I don't really think that we're gonna, which by the way, I wonder if, and this might be a call for you to step up, people in various areas, but I wonder if bar owners or anything are freaking out, or liquor store owners, because isn't it kind of weird that all of a sudden it's kids can have flavored vapes and that's a big problem, but no one has ever really talked about the fact that you can get blueberry vodka, or I don't know.
Same principle.
You can get alcohol that doesn't even taste like alcohol. You can find recipes online to make it look and taste like a Coke or something like that. It's but we don't have those discussions even on the same principle. You know what I mean?
I'm sure there's 15-year-olds still drinking UV cake. I'm
Yep,
sure they're still putting, a bottle of schnapps down. Why? Oh, it tastes like candy. But
and we've actually seen a lot of young people, particularly in this state, in this area, die from overconsumption of alcohol. But that's not the one. And listen, I'm not saying, I am the crazy libertarian. I think if you want to ruin your liver drinking fruity peppermint schnapps, that's your damn right, and I have no one to interfere with that. That being said, it's interesting what we pick to go off of. And it's interesting that what we choose to attack is the most complex and convoluted and multifaceted issue that's really come up in public health in decades, right?
Education needs to be a big thing, I think, when it comes to all that.
Exactly, and then the government just smashes it. I don't get the blunt reaction specifically towards this quote unquote new and scary thing. It seems very. It kind of seems like there might be a group of... I wonder what industry might theoretically stand to lose substantial amounts of money by overplaying fear due to the threats from vaping.
I don't understand it, therefore it's bad.
Yeah, there is always that. Oh my gosh.
Hey man, it's just how that's just like the conservative culture, and that's totally fine. Like I get it. Like there are definitely some weird stuff that comes out, and you go, oh, but not everything is scary. And I think once you finally, just we have the internet at our fingertips now. In my opinion, like you have no right to be uneducated. You have everything right there. I know there's some misinformation goes on, but use your brain, guys. Like, sort through the misinformation from the information. Read articles, stay educated. Like, that's how you figure out, okay, this is bad, this is not bad, this could be bad. There's a whole, arc for that. So,
you know what? That sounds like a great place to close it out because, listen, that right there is the only way that we're actually going to decrease use of vaping and other nicotine products. I'm so terribly sorry, but mommy government isn't going to do it for you again. They're not going to get the young kids to stop smoking. Unfortunately, we need to do that. We, the people, need to do the legwork. And it doesn't seem like we've really particularly wanted to do the legwork.
Stop letting them hold your hand, guys.
Yep.
Just let them just go. Just figure it out.
Yep, figure it out. Here's the thing. You know your kids better than the government. A blanket ban isn't going to work. But talking to them and treating them like, I don't know, individuals who have reason and understanding and empathy just might. So with that, we'll close it out. This has been...
Angry Libertarian.
The Crazy Libertarian. Close. I'll have it. This has been Connor Schmidt. This has been Bradley Foster, the Crazy Libertarian. Everything is backwards. Am I just the special guest? Whose show is this? This has been my awesome guest, Connor Schmidt.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming. And let's... Definitely interesting times ahead. Let's see if eventually we're going to get to the point where you might be vaping on minding your own business and the government agent might come up, ask for your papers, please, and ask to identify the flavor of that liquid. We'll find out, America. Hey, it's like 1984 with like underground strawberry shortcake running rings. That sounds pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Roaring Twenties are going to be interesting. I'll close it out with that. Have a great one, folks.